Hey, in this video we're going to be doing an Aly Fila lead sound using Sylenth, fulfilling a request that somebody had on another video comment of mine that they wanted me to do an Aly Fila tutorial, so we're going to be doing this song. Here's the sound, the finished sound that we're going to be recreating here. Oh, I'm sorry, this is what it sounds like when it's fully open. That's the actual song. That's the sound. Alright, are you ready? Let's dive into it. First thing we're going to do is make a new MIDI track, so Command-Shift-T if you're on Mac, and I'm going to throw in this MIDI that I've already written right here. If you want this MIDI, you can either look at the screen briefly and just copy this, or you can download it in the video description. I'll put it in a zip file that you can download. If you just check the video description, go download that for quick getting started. Now, we're going to add Sylenth to this track, and it's going to be one of two instances of Sylenth that we're going to be using. So we might as well group it and duplicate it and mute the second one, and we're just going to be focusing on this first one for now. I'm going to kill the utility track. That's just something I have on default every track here. So when we open up Sylenth, notice that my default patch looks a little bit different than yours, because I think if you didn't change yours is the ARP 303 whatever. So please take note that mine is not retriggering the oscillator on any of these. Voice is set to 1 here. It's a saw. The detune's all the way down. The stereo's all the way up. I don't remember if anything else is different. I have the cutoff automatically set here for cutoff AB. Just make sure that the patch that you're using looks exactly like this when you start. I think polyphony's up to 16. The cutoff filter here is all the way up. Low pass is selected, 24. Cutoff is right at the middle here at 5, or 4.997. Now it's 5. All right, so just make sure it looks like that. Now, first thing we're going to do is on oscillator A1, set it to 8 voices and set the detune amount to 3.225, or however close we get to that. Whoa, that was like right there. I'm going to make it exact by holding Shift and dragging. Lets you get little minute changes. 3.225. Good. For the amp envelope, turn the sustain down pretty far to like 1.74. That's good. Push the decay up to 4.02-ish. Pull it down a bit. That's good. Bring the release up to 3.4. Close enough. And we're going to copy this to amp envelope B, which means in the part B, we just made this get sent right over to the other side without having to redo all that stuff. Now, making sure we're still in part A, we're going to take oscillator A2 and push it up to 7 voices, bring the detune to 4.21, and leave it at that. And we don't need to actually adjust the phase here because we're not retriggering the phase every time. A lot of the times people in the YouTube videos that I see will like change the phase, but it really doesn't matter because the phase is random every time when you don't have this selected. So you can literally just leave it at 0, even though that one's at 0, and it's okay. It's not going to cause any problems. So we'll leave it. For filter A, we're going to select the input to be part A and B, and we're going to jump over to part B and turn this to no input. That's going to make it so that the oscillators from part B are going to be fed through this filter on the part A area and not through part B. Not through the part B filter right here, but through A. Now for oscillator B1, we're going to set it to 4 voices, make sure retriggering is not on, and set the detune to 5.57, or as close to that as you want to get. That's good. We're going to turn the volume down a bit here too, to 5.575 is what I have written down. So let's do it. Yeah, 7.6 is good enough for me. For oscillator B2, we're going to set it to 1 voice, and this one we're actually going to leave the retrigger on. This is our mono compatibility oscillator, kind of. And we're going to bring the volume down to 6.217, or 18. Now, for the volume of mix B, we're going to bring it all the way down. We don't want these to play because they're just going to be unfiltered and raw sounding. So we're shutting them off by turning this all the way down. In fact, because we set this to no input, I think that's actually doing the same thing. We don't really need to do this, but I just like to do it for my own cleanliness so I can know what's going on when I'm looking at part A. I don't need to look to part B to see if it's sending the signal. I just know automatically because part B is all the way down here. Now for mod envelope 1, make sure your cutoff is a sine, or your thingy the effect is assigned to cut off AB. That's this guy, the filter control. Bring the amount here up to 6. 0.000. Let's get it exact. The decay, we'll bring it up to 3.04. The release up to 3.53. Too far. And we're good. Now for this miscellaneous thing, make sure your source is set to mod wheel. We're going to change the destination to cut off AB right here. And we're going to bring the amount here down to -7.857. Now for the EQ, we're going to tick it on, leave it at 1 pole, bring the bass all the way down, bump the treble up, or bring it down actually, to 5.5. And the frequency will bring it down to 920. I love the EQ in Sylenth, and I love just doing this with it. That's pretty much the sweet spot for me, for lead sounds. I love hitting around that area with these two guys and making sure the bass is all the way down, 1 pole. We're not going to use the compressor, and we're going to bring the main volume here all the way up to 10. Now if we listen, this is what that sounds like right now. Now for our other instance of Sylenth, we're mostly going to be using it for noise, so I'm gonna turn the mute thing off here, and I'm actually just going to solo it, and we're going to focus only on this one right now. And actually, a faster way to do this, because we're going to be copying a lot of values here, would be to delete this entirely and duplicate what we just did, this Sylenth, so I can have the amp envelope and stuff going. So kill your other Sylenth, duplicate the one we just made for the first one, and we're going to just go manually disable all the oscillators, except for oscillator A1. So all these voices down to 0. Bring this one down to 1 voice. Excuse me, 2 voices. And we're going to set it to noise with no detune. We're going to set the amp envelope to 1.44, decay to 3.745, and the release to 0.5, or excuse me, 0.05. Not 0.5, that's a big difference. We're going to bring down the release on the mod envelope 1 to 0. Going to leave the EQ exactly as it is. We're actually going to use the compressor here, so we're going to turn this on, click into it, make sure the ratio is 4.26. There we go, almost. Yeah, that's good. The threshold to -20.1. The attack to 14 milliseconds. I was very nearly there to begin with. The release to 56 milliseconds. And we're going to set the main volume to 0.668. Here's what that sounds like. And together. Now for automation purposes, because this doesn't just play exactly like this throughout the whole thing, we're going to hook some of the values up to the macro knobs. So we're going to click the little arrow, down arrow thing right here on the first Sylenth version, and click configure. Now basically anything that we touch in here, anything that's a knob that we touch or click with the mouse is going to be automatically popping up here. The ones we want to touch are the mod wheel. So now that's there, you see. And the destination amount right here, just click it and it'll pop up there. Now we'll set the mod wheel thing to map to macro 1 and the other one to macro 2. Now the reason that I like doing this is that we can control the mapping window here so that you know the range that you want to automate from. Just so like you can set a maximum and minimum value here that just makes it really easy for you to switch between the range of what you want the sound to be like throughout the progression of the song. And we're going to do that for the destination amount. I think it should be good if we just type in 0.8 here and 0.52 here. That'll make it so that this thing will go between 6 and 0.4. The mod wheel we leave alone here because we want it to go from the absolute minimum to the absolute maximum. And we're just going to do the same for the other instance of Sylenth here by clicking configure on that one and hitting the same knobs, mapping them to the same macro, so the destination to number 2 and the cutoff to number 1. And let's make sure that the values are the same, so 0.8 here and 0.52 here. Now when we move this knob here, we get 0.4 on both of them and 6.0 on both. That's what we want. Now just listening to this, it sounds quite a bit wimpier and more lame than this, doesn't it? That's because we're going to be using a handful of plugins to make it sound all cool and beefy and wet and sexy. So the first of which, I'm going to try and stick to mostly Ableton native plugins, so we're going to use the delay. So make sure that it's ping-ponging right here, make sure that's on, set both of these to 1, and set the feedback to 36. Set the wetness to 41%, and make sure that yours is, if you right-click the dry wet knob, make sure it's set to equal loudness. Put the filter at 2080 hertz with the width setting of 7, and that's it. Now it sounds like this. Excuse me, that's the wrong track. Now it sounds like this. Okay, a little bit closer. For the reverb, we're actually going to use the non-Ableton plugin, Valhalla Vintage Verb, because like nothing else suffices for me. And I'm just going to choose a preset that I made, which is called Bride Hall Pads. I've been making various presets, and I'll include this one in the description of the video as well. And I just turned the low cut down to 420 for this. And I'm setting the mix down to 26.2. And if you want this, you can just screenshot it and take all the settings, or you can just grab the thing in the video description anyway, because you're going to get the MIDI, right? So it'll be there for you. But it's a really great sounding preset, and it's now sounding like this. Love that reverb. Next, we're going to do a little bit of EQ. So we're going to go to the EQ8, and I have a preset that is the Joshua Adam Harsh Resonance Remover. It's my go-to for like synth leads and pads mostly, especially if they're like super sawy. It just tames some of the harsh frequencies that are common in a lot of those types of patches. And I got some of the inspiration from using, what's that plugin, Alliance plugin called? The Master Desk. I'm copying some of the frequencies that the Master Desk will filter out of a mix. And I found that those are really, really useful to filter out of synths and pads. So I just put them in this along with some of my own cuts. And basically the way that I use this generally is I just scale how much it needs. Basically, like, you don't want it to be a cartoonish cut. And even right at the 100%, it kind of sometimes sounds a little cartoonish. So I tend to dial it back to like 50 to 60, maybe even sometimes 40%. Just enough so that it's the harsh frequencies are kind of barely out of perception, but not like clearly deeply cut, if that makes sense. But for this one, anyway, we're going to leave it at 100%. We're going to disable number 5 and number 3. And I'm going to put this in the little pack that I'll give you in the video description as well. In fact, if you get the pack for no other reason, it should be to get this, because this will literally take your mixing, EQing of your lead sounds to a whole new level. Now we're going to turn this little low pass thing on and set it to 150, high pass, and turn on number 2, set it to a bell, put this to 2000 hertz, and bring it down to negative 1.35 with a 1.09 Q. Then we're going to do another EQ, just because I like separating EQs for the purpose. And the purpose of this one is mostly for removing stuff, removing harshness and whatnot. And this one is going to be used for a little bit of, just a tiny bit of shaping. So we'll take this band 4, put it to 910 hertz, and bring this down negative 2.2, so 1.13 Q. And band 7, which I have automatically set to a high shelf, I'm going to enable that. Set the frequency to 4750 hertz, raise it by 2.78 dB, put the Q to 0.29. In band 8, we're going to just cut out some of the high, harsh, super high frequencies and set it to 15,300 hertz. And because the way that this thing works, this is basically, this low pass filter is basically performing like a 24 dB per octave filter because of the way EQ8 works. We want it a little bit smoother sounding because you'll still get some of the harsh, high, super high stuff that will basically interfere with your hi-hats and stuff in your mix. So here's what that sounds like right now. We're still getting some of that, but if we right-click this and change it to oversampling, now you see that changes to a smoother. This is actually a 12 dB per octave now. That's just the way Ableton's EQ8 works, and it's only for stuff that's pretty high up here. I don't really want to explain it all, but just keep that in mind, or just use FabFilter Pro Q8, which is way better, and uses less CPU, weirdly. So that now sounds like this. In flipping back and forth, I don't know if you can hear it, but I can. The harshness of the super high frequencies is more pronounced when it's at the non-oversampling thing. So that's what we got at this smooth 12 dB slope here with oversampling. Next up, let's compress a little bit. So we'll use the default Ableton compressor. Put it in peak mode if yours is not, because mine's are automatically in RMS mode. Keep the ratio at 2.0 to 1. Put the attack to 10 milliseconds, the release to 60 milliseconds, and bring the threshold down to negative 15.3. We'll put in 2.8 dB of makeup gain, leave the knee at 6 dB. Now, this is what that does. We're basically pronouncing the peaks of each hit a little bit, basically. Finally, we'll add a saturator, and mine is set to analog clip, and make sure that yours, if you right-click it, is not in high quality mode. And before we play the sound, let's just go back. I forgot to do a couple things that will make a big difference here. Let's set the mix A on the first Sylenth with the saw oscillators to 8.27. And then we're going to go into the noise Sylenth oscillator, and we're going to set the EQ treble amount all the way up. And the other thing I messed up on was that this was supposed to be 2-pole, and when we configured this thing, I clicked the filter cutoff instead of the mod wheel. So let's click the mod wheel and map that one instead of the filter cutoff to macro 1 and unmap that one. So now this is the mod wheel, not the filter cutoff. Okay, with that, we're pretty much done here. This is what the fully open sound sounds like. And if we compare it to the track, about the only difference you can hear is that the Sylenth is a little bit more kind of punchy on the attack, which you could just... I think the main difference is the fact that they probably used an actual JP8000 for their lead sound, but you can kind of get that sort of sloppy attack a little bit of the JP8000 with Sylenth just by going to the other envelope, mod envelope here, and putting it to the volume A and B, and bringing the sustain all the way down and the decay up just barely, and playing with it till we get to a point and bring the amount down so that it's kind of taking away a bit of the attack. So I'll just play with it a bit and see if I can get close. And then we'll want to do the same thing for the other Sylenth instance. So going here, setting it to volume AB. What was the amount here? Negative 4.5 with 0.613. So 0.613. And negative 4.5, right? 4.53, yeah. And that's really it. Now all that's left to do is to automate the cutoff changes. So let's listen to what it sounds like in the beginning here. So I'm just going to draw something in just to very quickly approximate what we would do here. So first thing we'll want to do is turn this down. Excuse me, turn this one up. So we'll start there. That's why I have the values set exactly as they are in the mapping, because that's our starting point, and our ending point is this. So I'll set it back to starting, turn on the automation, and put the brush on. Just click here, make sure it's at the 0 starting point, and let's just listen quickly and see where it really starts to open up. So basically, from what it sounds like, the first thing we're going to be doing is pulling up the destination amount. And then letting the mod wheel take the filter all the way up after that. So we set it correctly with that first automation, and let's see if we can approximate where it ends up at various points. Moving a little bit faster. So this is pretty much all the way up right there, and maybe a little bit, oops, a little bit slopey. I mean, I could be a perfectionist about this. That's good enough for me. And then from here, so you hear what's really happening is the filter cutoff is getting pushed up. So we're going to take this now, and because we're going to take the mod wheel rather, and where was that dot there? Right here. So put a little thing right here, and we're going to bring it down to the drop and see what that sounds like. There you have it. Only thing I would say is that I think his actually has a little bit more top end, so maybe just a little boost. Yeah, something like that. Anyway, that's the tutorial for the Aly Fila lead sound. I hope that was helpful. If you have any questions, feel free to make a comment below the video. If you want the stuff, the patches and whatnot, then just go grab the link in the video description and I'll give it to you. Final question is, do you have any requests for future videos you'd like to see? Any tutorials or anything like that you'd want to see me be giving to you? Any help with certain types of sounds or mixing or creativity or arrangement or music theory? I'd be happy to help however you need it. Anyway, I hope you have a fantastic day. I love you, and do great things.